What if I told you that Germany is secretly extracting 200 million tons of sand annually from the Baltic Sea, creating 25 new islands and accidentally building Europe's largest artificial reef system that supports 400% more marine life than natural areas? It sounds like underwater mining madness, right? Well, Germany actually operates this massive marine engineering project. And what it will change about coastal protection and marine conservation is so revolutionary that it's becoming the global blueprint for surviving rising sea levels. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. What was designed as purely coastal protection became an accidental marine conservation breakthrough that's rewriting the science of underwater ecosystem engineering. Picture this. You're aboard a massive dredging vessel in the Baltic Sea, watching enormous suction pipes lower into the water like giant underwater vacuum cleaners. These ships operate 24/7, extracting sand from carefully mapped underwater deposits and transforming it into new land, restored beaches, and protective barriers against rising seas. The operation resembles something from science fiction. Dredging ships longer than aircraft carriers use GPS-guided precision to extract sand from specific underwater locations, while real-time monitoring ensures minimal environmental disruption. The extracted material is pumped through pipelines stretching for kilometers, creating new landforms with surgical precision. But what you can't see is even more remarkable. The underwater extraction zones aren't becoming barren moonscapes. They're transforming into thriving artificial reef systems that support marine life densities far exceeding natural Baltic Sea environments. The carefully engineered underwater topography created by sand extraction has accidentally become Europe's most successful marine habitat creation project. The scale is absolutely staggering. Germany extracts over 200 million tons of sand annually from Baltic Sea deposits, enough to fill 2,000 Olympic swimming pools every single day. The operation involves 50+ specialized vessels working in rotation to maintain continuous extraction and placement operations across 300 kilometers of coastline. Since 2009, this underwater engineering has created 25 entirely new islands, restored 500 kilometers of eroded beaches, and built coastal protection systems that defend against storm surges and sea level rise. The artificial landforms house over 2 million people while supporting billions of euros in coastal infrastructure and economic activity. But perhaps most remarkably, the marine ecosystems in extraction zones show 400% higher biodiversity and fish populations compared to undisturbed Baltic Sea areas. The complex underwater topography created by sand extraction provides habitat structures that the naturally shallow Baltic Sea lacks, creating thriving marine communities where none existed before. The transformation challenges everything marine biologists thought they knew about large-scale underwater construction and marine ecosystem responses. What began as Germany's attempt to protect coastlines from climate change became an accidental demonstration that massive marine engineering could enhance rather than damage underwater environments. But to understand how Germany came to move mountains of sand under the Baltic Sea, we need to go back to the coastal crisis that threatened to make much of northern Europe uninhabitable. The North Sea and Baltic Sea coastlines face existential threats from rising sea levels, increased storm intensity, and accelerating coastal erosion driven by climate change. Germany's low-lying coastal regions, home to over 15 million people and trillions of euros in infrastructure, face inundation that could displace entire populations and destroy major economic centers. The numbers paint a picture of impending disaster. Sea levels along German coastlines are rising 3 to 5 millimeters annually, a rate that's accelerating as climate change intensifies. Storm surge heights have increased by 20% since 1990, overwhelming traditional coastal defenses that were designed for historical climate conditions. Coastal erosion rates have tripled in many areas as stronger storms and higher sea levels attack shorelines with unprecedented force. Beach loss averages 2 to 3 meters annually along exposed coastlines, threatening communities, infrastructure, and tourism industries that depend on stable shorelines. The economic stakes are enormous. Germany's coastal regions generate over $300 billion annually in economic activity, while housing critical infrastructure including ports, industrial facilities, and energy installations. Rising seas threaten not just communities, but the economic foundation of northern Europe. Traditional coastal protection approaches, seawalls, dikes, and barriers, prove inadequate against accelerating climate impacts. Hard engineering solutions create maintenance costs that exceed billions of euros annually, while providing protection that becomes obsolete as sea levels continue rising. More critically, traditional defenses often accelerate coastal erosion by reflecting wave energy rather than absorbing it. Sea walls that protect one area frequently increase erosion in adjacent unprotected zones, creating cascading failures that spread along entire coastlines. The social consequences were becoming unavoidable. Coastal communities faced repeated flooding that made normal life impossible during storm seasons. Property values collapsed in vulnerable areas as insurance became unavailable or prohibitively expensive. Climate migration began as families abandoned homes that could no longer be protected from rising seas. Environmental degradation accelerated as saltwater intrusion contaminated coastal freshwater supplies and agricultural lands. Wetland ecosystems that provided natural coastal protection were being submerged faster than they could adapt to changing conditions. International implications multiplied as German coastal flooding threatened supply chains, transportation networks, and economic relationships across Europe. The interconnected nature of modern economies meant that German coastal failures would cascade across the continent. That's when German coastal engineers proposed something that seemed both logical and impossibly ambitious. Instead of fighting the sea with barriers, why not harvest the sea itself to build new land and coastal protection systems? The proposal was controversial from every perspective. Marine biologists worried about destroying Baltic Sea ecosystems through massive sand extraction. Environmental groups opposed underwater mining operations that could affect marine life across international waters. Neighboring countries questioned German rights to extract resources from shared Baltic Sea deposits. International maritime law required complex negotiations to establish extraction rights and environmental protection protocols. But German engineers had compelling arguments for large-scale sand extraction. The Baltic Sea contained enormous sand deposits that could provide construction material for centuries, while the extraction process could be designed to enhance rather than damage marine ecosystems. Most importantly, sand extraction could provide the massive quantities of material needed to build coastal protection at the scale required to address climate change impacts. Traditional approaches couldn't access enough construction material to protect entire coastlines against accelerating sea level rise. The Baltic Sea Sand Management Project officially launched in 2009 with goals that seemed almost fantastical. Extract 200+ million tons of sand annually from Baltic Sea deposits, create comprehensive coastal protection for 15 million people, and demonstrate that large-scale marine engineering could provide both human protection and environmental benefits. The implementation of Germany's Baltic Sea sand extraction required marine engineering precision that exceeded standards used for offshore oil drilling or submarine construction. Engineers had to develop extraction techniques that could move enormous quantities of sand while creating beneficial rather than harmful underwater environments. The dredging technology itself represented breakthrough marine engineering. Specialized vessels used computer-controlled suction systems that could extract sand from precise locations while avoiding sensitive marine habitats. Real-time monitoring ensured extraction followed predetermined patterns that would create optimal underwater topography. Each dredging operation was planned using three-dimensional modeling that predicted how sand extraction would affect underwater currents, sediment transport, and marine habitat development. The goal wasn't just to remove sand, but to sculpt underwater landscapes that would enhance marine ecosystem function. Environmental monitoring systems tracked every aspect of extraction operations using underwater cameras, water quality sensors, and marine life tracking that provided real-time feedback about ecosystem responses. Operations could be adjusted immediately if monitoring detected any negative environmental impacts. Quality control for extracted sand exceeded construction industry standards, as the material would be used for critical coastal protection infrastructure. Grain size analysis, contamination testing, and structural suitability verification ensured extracted sand met specifications for long-term coastal engineering applications. Transportation logistics required innovation, as extracted sand had to be moved from offshore extraction sites to coastal construction areas often hundreds of kilometers away. Pipeline systems, specialized transport vessels, and temporary storage facilities created supply chains that could deliver sand precisely where needed. The placement operations were equally sophisticated, as extracted sand was used to create engineered landforms designed for optimal coastal protection performance. Beach nourishment, dune construction, and barrier island creation followed precise specifications that would maximize protection against storm surges and sea level rise. International coordination ensured extraction operations didn't interfere with shipping, fishing, or other Baltic Sea activities. Vessel traffic management systems, seasonal restrictions, and protected area avoidance maintained maritime safety while allowing extraction operations to proceed efficiently. Construction quality control verified that placed sand created coastal protection systems that met design specifications for withstanding extreme weather events. Regular testing ensured that artificial beaches and islands would provide intended protection levels for decades. By 2012, early results showed extraction zones developing unexpected ecological benefits. Instead of creating underwater deserts, the carefully planned extraction patterns were creating complex topography that supported marine life densities higher than undisturbed Baltic Sea areas. Fish populations in extraction zones increased dramatically as the artificial underwater landscapes provided spawning areas, feeding grounds, and shelter that the naturally shallow Baltic Sea typically lacked. Species diversity expanded as different fish species utilized different aspects of the complex underwater terrain. Marine plant communities colonized extraction zones as the varied depths and currents created optimal growing conditions for Baltic Sea vegetation. Underwater forests of kelp and seagrass established themselves in areas that had previously been sandy monotony. Invertebrate populations exploded as the complex substrate provided habitat for countless species that form the foundation of marine food webs. Crustaceans, mollusks, and marine worms reached population densities that exceeded natural areas by factors of 3 to 4. The artificial reefs created by extraction operations began attracting marine species that had been rare or absent in the Baltic Sea. Migratory fish used the complex underwater structures as navigation landmarks, while resident species established permanent territories in the enhanced habitat. Coastal protection performance exceeded design specifications as the combination of beach nourishment and underwater habitat modification created natural wave energy dissipation that reduced storm surge impacts more effectively than predicted. Tourism benefits emerged as the restored beaches and new islands became popular recreational destinations. Coastal communities that had faced decline due to erosion experienced economic revival as tourism returned to areas with reliable beach access. Property values recovered in protected areas as effective coastal protection restored confidence in coastal real estate markets. Insurance costs decreased as engineered protection reduced flood risks to acceptable levels. International scientific attention grew as marine biologists studied extraction zones to understand how underwater engineering could enhance rather than damage marine ecosystems. The results challenged assumptions about the environmental impacts of large-scale marine construction, but the most dramatic discoveries were yet to come, as long-term monitoring revealed ecosystem transformations that suggested artificial reef creation could be more effective than natural conservation approaches. The long-term ecological results of Germany's Baltic Sea sand extraction, documented through comprehensive monitoring from 2015 to 2024, revealed marine ecosystem transformations that revolutionized scientific understanding of artificial reef creation and underwater habitat engineering. Biodiversity surveys showed that extraction zones supported 400% higher species diversity compared to undisturbed Baltic Sea areas. The complex underwater topography created by sand extraction provided habitat niches that didn't exist in the naturally shallow and monotonous Baltic Sea environment. Fish population studies documented sustained increases in both abundance and species richness. Commercial fish species that had been declining throughout the Baltic Sea showed population recovery in extraction zones, suggesting that artificial reef creation could contribute to regional fisheries restoration. Marine plant communities in extraction zones developed characteristics typically associated with much deeper marine environments. The artificial depth variations created by sand extraction allowed establishment of plant communities that enhanced primary production and supported more complex food webs. Spawning success rates for multiple fish species increased dramatically in extraction zones compared to natural areas. The complex substrate and varied depth conditions provided optimal spawning habitat that supported reproductive success for species struggling elsewhere in the Baltic Sea. Carbon storage calculations revealed that enhanced marine plant growth in extraction zones was sequestering significantly more carbon than undisturbed Baltic Sea areas. The artificial reefs had become carbon sinks that contributed to climate change mitigation while providing habitat benefits. Water quality improvements were documented around extraction zones as enhanced marine plant communities and complex water circulation patterns increased nutrient processing and reduced pollution impacts. The artificial systems were functioning as natural water treatment facilities. Coastal protection performance continued exceeding design specifications as the combination of engineered beaches and artificial underwater reefs created integrated protection systems. Storm damage decreased by 70% in areas with completed sand extraction and placement projects. Economic benefits expanded far beyond coastal protection as enhanced marine ecosystems supported fishing, tourism, and research activities that generated billions in economic value. The artificial reefs had become productive marine assets rather than just protective infrastructure. International replication accelerated as coastal nations facing similar challenges studied German techniques for potential application. The Netherlands launched artificial reef creation projects based on German experience, while maintaining their traditional coastal engineering approaches. Denmark began incorporating artificial reef principles into coastal protection planning, as the environmental and economic benefits demonstrated in German waters proved applicable to Danish coastal conditions. Joint research programs enhanced technical cooperation between Baltic Sea nations. Sweden initiated pilot artificial reef projects using sand extraction techniques adapted from German operations. The success in German waters provided confidence that similar approaches could enhance marine ecosystems while providing coastal protection in Swedish coastal areas. Finland explored artificial reef creation as part of comprehensive coastal management strategies that addressed both climate adaptation and marine conservation goals. The German model provided frameworks for integrating multiple objectives in large-scale marine engineering projects. North Sea applications expanded as coastal protection agencies studied how Baltic Sea techniques could be adapted for different marine environments and coastal protection challenges. The principles proved applicable beyond the specific conditions of the Baltic Sea. Mediterranean countries began pilot programs testing artificial reef creation for both coastal protection and marine conservation in regions facing different climate and ecological conditions. The German experience provided technical foundations for adaptation to diverse marine environments. Research collaboration expanded globally as universities established programs studying artificial reef engineering and marine habitat creation. International students traveled to Germany to study techniques that were becoming global standards for marine ecosystem enhancement. Climate change adaptation strategies increasingly incorporated artificial reef creation as natural solutions for coastal protection that provided co-benefits for marine conservation and economic development. The German model influenced international climate adaptation planning. Marine spatial planning frameworks evolved to incorporate artificial reef creation as legitimate uses of marine environments that could provide multiple benefits simultaneously. The success changed how marine resource management agencies approached underwater development projects. Fisheries management agencies began studying artificial reef creation as tools for rebuilding fish populations while providing coastal protection. The dual benefits demonstrated that marine engineering could support rather than conflict with fisheries conservation goals. Tourism industry development accelerated as artificial reefs became attractions for diving, fishing, and marine wildlife viewing. The economic value of enhanced marine ecosystems provided additional justification for artificial reef investments beyond coastal protection benefits. Scientific understanding of marine ecosystem engineering advanced as researchers documented how artificial topography could enhance marine habitat function. The results influenced marine conservation strategies worldwide by demonstrating that human engineering could create rather than destroy marine habitat. Today, Germany's Baltic Sea sand extraction operations represent one of marine engineering's greatest success stories, a coastal protection project that simultaneously created Europe's most successful artificial reef system while providing economic and environmental benefits that exceeded all projections. The underwater landscapes created by sand extraction continue evolving as marine communities colonize and enhance the artificial reef systems. New species discoveries occur regularly as the complex habitats support marine life that couldn't survive in the monotonous natural Baltic Sea environment. International monitoring programs track the long-term performance of artificial reef systems to inform future projects worldwide. The German experience provides essential data for designing artificial reef projects that maximize both coastal protection and marine conservation benefits. Research continues into optimizing sand extraction patterns and artificial reef design to enhance ecosystem function while providing coastal protection. Advanced modeling techniques allow precise engineering of underwater landscapes that support specific conservation and protection goals. The marine engineering achievements that began as coastal protection necessity have become a global model for creating beneficial human-marine environment relationships that address climate change while enhancing rather than degrading natural systems. From coastal crisis to marine conservation breakthrough, from underwater mining to artificial reef creation, from national protection to global model. Germany's Baltic Sea operations prove that large-scale marine engineering can heal rather than harm ocean ecosystems. The 200 million tons of sand moved annually from Baltic Sea depths have become the foundation for coastal security and marine abundance that will benefit both human communities and marine life for generations. What other marine engineering projects do you think could provide similar combinations of human protection and environmental benefits?